This is the sounds of Don't Starve. Kind of what one sound person can do. So who am I? As I said, that's me. I'm Matthew Marteinsson. I'm the audio guy at Clay Entertainment. As was said, I kind of am it. There's me and two composers. So I do all the sounds for all of our games. So this is kind of about how I created all the sounds creatively, and I'm getting into a little bit of the technical stuff because some people might find that interesting. Who here knows the game? Yay! For those that don't, this is the game. I just wanted to show you some of the actual... So this is some actual gameplay instead of just a trailer. So this goes on for a while. To try and speed things up, I'm just gonna skip past. There's a bunch of cool sounds in there, but you know, that's cool. So high-level points about the game. I was it. There was one guy. That was me. We had two composers who were a team that make all the music for the game. They're amazing. They've done all of our music. We had no dedicated programmer, so it was kind of whatever programmer I could grab that was on the team became my audio programmer for the day. It worked. It's nicer to have a dedicated audio programmer, but you know, we made it work. We had no specific audio budget. No. Don't clap for that. Well, we had no specific audio budget. We did use middleware, so there was money budgeted for Fmod. I'll talk some other points about it. I highly recommend you get middleware for your games. There's Fmod and Wise now have, and Fabric, if you're using Unity, have some really great free versions and licenses. As Alex can attest to, who wrote his own audio engine and now wishes he had gotten Fmod. We named it Take Advantage of What We Had because we had no budget. There's only one of me. So we did a lot of vocal performances because my voice is there and ready to go. I used a lot of dollar store items. We have a dollar store a block from the studio, so I went there whenever I had a weird idea. I'd walk over and go ransack the dollar store. And I also had some friends who had bought the contents of a dollar store at one point, which I was able to pretty much ransack for weird things that they couldn't sell, but I could smash. So that was really great. So, you know, use what you've got. I used a broad number of libraries that I sourced sounds from. I recorded as much as I could, but I also used libraries because there's just stuff that I don't have access to, like weird, crazy creatures. We paid for one location to record at, and I'll talk about that later. But that was basically the budget, was that one location that Jamie was kind enough to go, you really want to do that? That's going to be fun? And I was like, yeah, it is. And he's like, okay, go do it. So now we'll get into some of the specific sounds in the games. Voices was a really has become an iconic part of the game. Previous to Don't Starve, we worked on Mark of the Ninja. Mark of the Ninja was really dialogue heavy, and coming off of that, I just didn't want to do dialogue at all. I was like, no, I've edited far too much dialogue at this point. I want to break from that. But we knew we needed some sort of personality for all these really awesome characters that the artists were coming up with. I also knew that we need to iterate quickly because we were an early access game, one of the first early access games. We need to iterate really quickly on that. So dialogue does not lend itself to quick iteration. Like, it takes time. You have to write it, you have to record it, you have to master it, you have to implement it. Oh, you want to change one line? Okay, you got to do all of that again, get your actors in. It's not a quick thing. There's games that it is the right thing to do. This game, it was not the right thing to do. And we were writing so many lines, and rapidly, every week there was new lines going in. It just didn't make sense to like call in voice actors like every week we would have had to do. So, what did we do? This. We came up with the idea of musical instruments as the voices. That's the robot. So we threw around a bunch of ideas, and we got inspired by Charlie Brown's teacher from all the Charlie Brown cartoons, and Peter and the Wolf, which is a piece of classical music where it tells the tale of Peter and the Wolf, and every character in the story is represented by one of the sections of the orchestra. So I thought, all right, we can do that. We can give each character an instrument for their voice so that they'll have a personality. So I decided that was the right direction we were going to go in. So I sat down with the initial character sketches, which were just like this. We had that and names that went with everybody. And from that, I decided what's the character of that character? Like what's their personality? What goes with that? And went through my library of instruments I had at my disposal and picked an instrument for each character. A lot of them were wind instruments. So I'm originally a trained saxophone player, and I have this thing called an EWI, an electronic wind instrument that looks like a tube with buttons on it that allows you to control MIDI like you would a saxophone. So you can breathe into it. So you can make sampled wind instruments sound more like an actual wind instrument. So I used that to record all these little bits of music with each instrument, and then cut all those bits up into little couple of note chunks, and then put those into Fmod so that it randomly picks a selection of notes. And whenever one of the characters in the game starts talking, as long as there's text being displayed on the screen, we start it, and then when the text stops, we stop it. So it's a loop that just randomly is picking different elements. So every time that they talk, it sounds different. It's not the same thing every time because repetition in sound can be picked out so incredibly easy. That was it. Ended up being all of the girls in the game ended up being variations of flutes for some reason, other than Wickerbottom, the old librarian. She's an oboe because I don't know, that oboe sound fit for me. Like, that's an old librarian. Old librarians should be oboes. I don't know why, but it worked. So, we had tested it out with Wilson originally, and then we went with it worked, so we went with everybody, and it became a very iconic thing for the game that people really loved the voices. And when a new character got unlocked, you got a new voice that went with them. So it wasn't just the art that changed, the sound changed as well, that allowed them to really feel like they've got something new and they're playing in a different way. Creatures. So those are some of the creatures in the game. I think there's about 8 or 9 things in there, 2 of which are not my voice. This is probably the biggest area of the game, was creatures. Every creature had, I think, between 8 to 15 events for all of their actions. Each event was 10 to 20 sounds per event. So that blows out into like a very big thing. And because we were doing an iterative process where every 2 weeks we'd put out something, to show players that we were putting in new content, creatures was a fairly easy thing to do, so we were making a lot of them. Turned out to be a combination of my voice and different animal sounds. I'm probably 80 to 90% of the creatures in the game. And that came back to using what we had. We had my voice. My voice was there and free, and you can be incredibly expressive. Like when you're going, okay, I need an attack sound and a hurt sound and a death sound and an idle sound, and I need like finding dog sounds that fit all of those without going and doing horrible things to a dog. You know, like that's incredibly hard to find in libraries. But I can make a hurt sound really easily, a death sound, you know, legally. Like, so it was really easy for me to come up with the vocal sounds to go with lots of different creatures. And the few that I couldn't, I went into the sample libraries. My work lagged behind animation. The way we worked, generally, we'd come up with an idea, I would see the initial prototype idea of that, and get an idea, start building an idea of what I wanted to do. And then once they were closer to being finished, I would go back, I would sit with the animators and look at the timing of all the animations that went with the character and write down, how long is this? How long is this event? At what time does something interesting happen? The reason I did that was a lot of times sound guys will ask for movies, which is totally legitimate. When a sound guy asks you for a movie of your stuff, just give it to him. It really will speed things up and make things better. But we were working so quickly, I didn't have time for the animators to make lots of movies. And with the amount of creatures we were doing, it was prohibitive. So I just worked from timing. I just wrote down, this is 17 frames long, and made a sound that was 17 frames long. I lucked out. I didn't have to iterate because of timing very often. And in some cases, actually, we had the animations changed for the audio. Very specific case I do remember is when the hounds went into the game, they idled, and then they stopped, and they just sat there. And I was like, you know what? A dog sitting there pants. They're gonna pant. But their mouth didn't move. It just sat there. I was like, that's not panting. So I went to the animators and I'm like, hey, can we just move their mouth a little? And then I'll put in a panting. They're like, oh yeah, great, no problem. And an hour later, they now move their mouths when they pant. So it was really nice that we worked really closely with the animation team, being in-house. I can just walk over and go, hey, can we change this? And more often than not, they were like, sure, no problem. So if audio asks you to change animation at some point, it's probably not for a superfluous reason. There's a point to it. So don't be adverse to having that flow where you work back and forth. The ambient system, ambience is the other kind of biggest area of the game. I always kind of say that if you're doing audio, you're doing one of two things. You're either informing the player of something or you're world building. Our ambient system was definitely where we were world building. So how we did this, because it was a procedurally generated game, so it's not like we just like lay down, here's an ambient area. So what I did was each ground type had an ambient event associated to it. Each ambient event was made up of a loop and a big container of random elements. So that way the random elements would fire off at random times and randomly picked. So you didn't just hear like, oh, that's a 30-second loop. You never couldn't tell that the loop was going on because the loop was really boring. It's the random elements that you kind of would pick out. There was a different loop and random track for day and night. So when you transition to night, you get a different ambience for every area. So now we've got this event that handles day and night for every ground type. And the game pulls the area around the player. And I believe it was a 10 by 10 kind of spot. And it finds counts up every ground type in that area and would take the top 3, percentage them out, and then play that as a volume percentages. So if it was thus, we've got the rocky area, we've got like 70% of rocky and 20% grassland and 10% waves. It would play those volumes at that moment. And it would do that, we couldn't remember just how often, but I think it was about every second. So not like every tick, like not every frame it was checking the ambience. It was delayed enough, but it sold it. It's still, you gave it an idea of you moving around the world and that you were hearing where you were, which really helped build the sense of that. And we had it play all of it, and we like narrowed it down to 3, and this about a second checking for performance reasons. That if it was checking every tick and playing everything, it was too much. You didn't need that that amount. Now I'll get into a couple specific sounds that I just really like in the game. Who here has encountered the shadow hand? One person. Were you creeped out? Yeah, okay, I did my job right. So, the shadow hand is when you start to go crazy at night, this hand comes out of the darkness and tries to snuff out your fire. And it's just this thing. And you can scare it off. So I knew that I needed something creepy. You're going crazy. It's dark. It's this weird thing. So I remembered that I own a music box that lets you write your own music for it. It comes with these long sheets of paper, and you use a hole punch on it. And you punch out the holes, and then you wind it through, the paper through it, and it plays music notes. So I thought music boxes are creepy. That's what I'm going to use. When we had actually used the music box in a promotional video, because we had all these puzzles for the player when we were in early access, and we used that once to disseminate some information. So I was like, that was kind of in my head. I'm like, yeah, I want to use that again. So I punched out a song that was every note doubled up so that it was it and an octave above it. And I'm pretty sure it wasn't in tune, which also adds to the creepy factor, because our brain doesn't like out-of-tune stuff. So I recorded each note by itself, put those all into Fmod, where it would play back randomly, so not anything very musical, just random notes on a timeline. And then when you scare it off, it plays it back really quickly. And it sounds like this. We managed to scare it off. Otherwise, that's a lot of times you hear that, and then your fire goes out and you die. So that worked really well for creeping people out. Another thing I really love in the game is the one-man band. I don't think as many people as I would like make the one-man band. The one-man band, we had like morning stand-up meetings where we went out through, here's what everybody's doing today. We joked around in those meetings, a lot of ideas would come up, like, oh, we should make this, ha ha ha. And somebody, I don't remember who on the team, said, oh, we should make a one-man band. I was like, ha ha ha, no, yes, we should do that. I totally know what I want to do for that. And an artist was like, oh yeah, it'll take me like a day. I was like, awesome, we could put it into the game. And I went to the designers, you've got to figure out something that the one-man band does. And they're like, great. So I compiled all the musical elements that kind of would be in the one-man band, a bunch of cymbals and some kick drums and accordion stuff, and I made this event in Fmod that was 2 layers. One was the percussion layer and one was the accordion layer, and it would randomly pick notes from each of those with. Sometimes it wouldn't play each one. So sometimes you get accordion, sometimes you get a kick drum, sometimes you get a cymbal and an accordion. So it was very chaotic, not very musical. And when we put it in the game, we made it play every time they step, and then when he's standing still, he's like accordioning away as well. And the designers came up with the idea that it makes the pigs your friends. While you're playing a music, they dance and you're your friends. Usually you have to feed them meat, and then they're your friends and they will do your bidding. But this is like an instant friendship, so you could get a pack of pigs to be your friends. It also drives you crazy. That was the down point, because it's a one-man band. How would that not drive you crazy? All right, another very iconic sound is the Gobbler. Yeah. So I knew we were going to the idea was we're making a turkey-based creature. He's about the same size as the pig. I'm like, all right, I need some turkey sounds. Went looking in my libraries. I'm like, don't have any turkey sounds. So I went online to some of the websites you can buy individual sounds for, started searching for turkey sounds, bought like 4 or 5 turkey sounds that I found that I thought could work, and I was like, yeah, this will be good. And then I saw the final animations, and I was standing at the desk with the animator looking at it, and I realized I don't need any of these samples, because I was just standing there and looking at it, and I went, I'm like, that's that thing. And it was so good that I'm now banned from the office from ever making that sound. If my boss catches me, he's like, stop it, don't do that anymore. That and there's the little beep, 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 that guy. So the mind recording, this was our audio budget. We paid to record in the mine. So we were adding caves to the game. So it's the big underground area, and it was going to be a big deal. And I had run out of library sounds. I'd used up all my cave sounds. I was just like, I'm bored of these. It's just going to sound the same. We need something new. So I started looking around for caves in the area. We don't have caves. Vancouver's just doesn't. The land masses we have did not generate caves. They don't exist. So I found none, and I was striking out, and I started asking everybody on the team, everybody knew, I need underground sounds. What do you think? And they was like, oh, why don't you try car park? I'm like, well, no, because it's still going to be in the city, and we're getting electrical sounds, and that's not going to work. And and somebody on the team said, well, what about Britannia Mines? They've got a mining museum up there. They've got a mine. I was like, okay, that's legit. That's underground. That's pretty cave-like. And I hate talking on people on the phone, and I was like, I have to phone these people now, and can I come do this weird thing of recording in your mind? It was like, so I emailed them, solved that problem. Immediately heard back very quickly of yeah, sure, we do this for the film industry all the time. You're more than welcome to come in. We can get you in before anybody else, before the tours start. You can have the place to yourself. You're going to have to pay for it, though, because we have to have a person with you. You're not allowed to go down there by yourself for safety reasons. So awesome. So if you're thinking of recording somewhere strange, a lot of places in the Vancouver area are already used to film people approaching them. So it's not that weird to them to have that. So that can be a really good thing. And it wasn't actually that money. It was $150 an hour, so we got it for 2 hours. It was $300. They let us do whatever we wanted, and I was like, all right. I went to my boss. I'm like, hey, I want to spend some money. He was like, is that going to be fun for you? It's going to benefit the game. I'm like, yes. He's like, okay, go do it. So I rounded up a bunch of equipment. Yanni came along with me because I was like, I need an extra pair of hands. You want to come in a cave? And he's like, I don't need any cave sounds. And I was like, but it'll be fun. He's like, all right, fine. So we loaded up the car with a whole bunch of recording stuff and as much junk as I could find. You can this picture's dark, but that's a cymbal, because cymbal crashing in caves was a thing I decided was yeah, I had chains, I yelled, I did all kinds of stuff. Just thinking, we're only here for 2 hours, get as much as we possibly can. Anything we might need in the future. Because a cymbal, I'd have bowed the cymbal too, which is a weird, eerie sound. So I was like, an eerie sound in a cave is even better. More eerie. And we recorded impulses, which is a way of capturing a space that you can then put in a certain piece of software and replicate. You get the reverb of that space later on. So I was able to do that and apply the sound to any sound I might have later on that I wanted to put into that space. An interesting thing about it, too, we took a bunch of pictures. We were able to do a blog post for Don't Starve about this. We're going, hey, we're putting in caves. We didn't know what caves sounded like, so we sent our sound guy off to a cave. So it was a promotional thing as well. It paid off in multiple ways. We've got the great sounds for the game, and we got to kind of promote, hey, we're doing something different. So you can benefit that way for, indie games. We want to use as much as we can for any purpose we can. So that really helped with that as well. That was a really fun time. It was wet and dirty in there. Really, really wet and dirty. All right. Yay, debug tools, so exciting. But really, put them in your game. I've been lucky enough to have programmers build me debug tools for the last couple of games. Sound debug tools specifically will speed things up. They don't take that long to put in. Some middleware even has them built in already. Like Wise's debug tools are amazing. You just got to hook them up. What it means is, okay, so what we had was everything in the world showed when it triggered a sound event. It had a little number above it. And then we had a text list of the last 20 events that had fired off at any given moment. And that was displayed on screen. And then we had a separate section for looped sounds. What that meant was things like these forest fires were a huge sound problem because the sounds were moving around and we could only play so many sounds, so they were getting cut off. So you'd end up in areas with a raging forest fire with no sound, and it was really weird. So what the debug tools meant was that I could sit and poke around and figure out what was going on instead of me and a programmer sitting there poking around for a couple of days. So if you build decent, I'm not even asking for amazing, just decent debug tools for your sound guy, it'll allow them to go off and do all the heavy lifting, and then they'll just come to you like, hey, I found this. This is the problem, and we need to fix it. It's right here with this event at this time. So do that. I'm at the point now where I would just refuse to work without debug tools, and every other sound guy should too. The other interesting thing about our game is we were early access. We were early access before early access was a thing. So some of these things I figured out are sound specific, but kind of everybody can use them as well. Be prepared for people to be listening to your unfinished work. It's a thing that's a bit hard at first. You don't want everybody to hear like your mess. It's not mixed. It's not done. There only half the sounds are in there, but the build has to go out today. So you're like, there it is, and from that, you got to learn what feedback to listen to and what not to. There's good feedback. There's lots of great feedback that you get from this, and then there's stuff that is not. We changed. I remember we changed a HUD sound. And the instant reaction was, no, I hate it. Well, they didn't hate the new sound. They hated change. And there's an instant reaction by most people if it is changed, I don't like it. So take a step back a lot of times and go, okay, why is this person not liking what I've done? Is it that, or did I, put in something that's not very good? There's some cases where you're like, yeah, I did put in something not very good. And the next part, engage your community. That's when you go onto your forums or wherever these people are reporting this stuff and say, you know what, you're totally right. I am totally going to change that sound because it was not good. Or you can be like, I hear what you're saying, but we'll look at it later, which means I'm not going to change it. And when you're doing your updates, we were on a 2-week schedule. Once we released, we were on a 3-week schedule. Is plan your updates so that the players can see something changing. So put in, sounds that are like, there's lots of things we need to build out that take longer than 2 weeks, that the player doesn't really see. It's back-end stuff that we need, but the player doesn't see it. Make sure you're putting something into the updates that the players can also see so that they can be excited, like, hey, I can play the game again because something's changed. Mix as you go, as you're putting everything in, mix it, as best you can, but still make time for a final mix at the end. In fact, most people don't even if you're not in early access, make time to mix your game at the end. It's an incredibly important thing to do that a lot of people don't. Indie, AAA, everybody, nobody does it enough. Spend time just mixing your game once everything is in it and locked down and final and done. Mix your game. You can really go from people not liking it to it sounding incredible. And that's it. I'm done.